Now it's my pleasure to welcome Bart Markus. He cannot wait to jump on stage because he has lots of energy and some money to invest. You're actually a venture capitalist.
Lots of energy and little money, right? Excellent.
Bart Markus is a general partner, one of 4 general partners from Wellington Partners. It's your stage.
Excellent. So Jan asked me to talk about the role that venture capitalists play in creating startups in the Cleantech environment. So maybe before I go there, I got to do a little poll. How many of you here actually work for or are founders of a startup company in Cleantech? Okay, so it's about like 37. And how many of those 37 actually have venture money in their company? Yeah, so it's about 4 or 5. So we've gone down, and actually 2 of those actually have my money that were just raising their hand. So I think that's, which is a little bit illustrative to I think one of the challenges that we're facing is that there's a lot of talk about venture in this industry, but there's not necessarily a lot of action. So let me tell you what we do and maybe how we can improve that interaction. So what we do, in a way, is pretty simple. We pick companies, we put money in them, duh. We wave our magic wand, is what people think, and then we make them successful, and then in the end of the day, we get someone to believe that all of what we've created is true, and we sell these companies for a lot more money than we've put into it. Now, if that is all the case, then obviously the results of it should be that we have a fast-growing and very profitable venture industry in Europe, and reality is it's not the case. And this graph shows the funds which have been all monetized, so you can take newer funds, but it's very hard to see how much money they will ultimately generate. If you look at the funds through to 2000, they have all been completely, the portfolios have been monetized. So you see that bar, the funds which were started in '96, which actually made pretty good returns for investors because of the internet hype that we had at that point. Actually, most of the venture funds have actually not returned a lot of money to their investors. So it's a really shitty industry. It doesn't do very well. I think that's, now, why is that? And why is it even harder in Cleantech? I think if you'd ask someone why is venture capital in Cleantech very hard, there's 3 things that will always come up. And I want to dispel, of course, I'm not going to be, this is where I stop being negative, right? I'm going to become positive in a second. So there's 3 urban myths, I would say. One is Europe has no real entrepreneurs, and definitely not in Cleantech. The second one is that Cleantech is way too capital intensive, and the third one is it takes too long for a company to develop to make real money with it. So actually, we have had great European entrepreneurs, and not just on the digital media side, which I think everyone knows. Everyone will have a navigation system in their car, which is powered by Navtech. Those of you that do online betting, they will use Betfair. Everyone is on Skype probably multiple times a day. But actually also on the Cleantech side, there's been great Cleantech companies, and there's been great entrepreneurs that have started it. I mean, Anton Milner of Q-Cells, Alf Burset of REC, or the illustrious Frank Asbeck of SolarWorld are great entrepreneurs, and so there have actually been good case examples. So I would say they're not true that there's not great entrepreneurs in Cleantech in Europe. And we're getting increasingly more. Again, on the digital media side, someone mentioned Spotify, which I think has won the music industry. A European company, Adconian, European company in internet advertising, EY's, European company in online payment. But also on the Cleantech side, we see companies coming up that actually beat their American competitors, and there's great entrepreneurs that are backing these companies. Now, the second urban myth is capital intensity, and as I'm in Berlin, I want to be careful that when I use someone else's material that I actually disclose that. So this slide actually comes from someone most of you will know, Vino Koschla. He showed this slide actually way back when in 2003, 2004. This is the way that you traditionally do venture capital. And you can put quite a bit of money into a company as long as you make sure that you put that money into the company as the risk comes down. So you put a little bit of money in the seed. Whatever percentage of the companies don't make it through, maybe half, maybe 3/4, you lose a little bit of money, that's okay. When the company goes through, you put a little bit more money during R&D, even more money in go-to-market, and even more in expansion capital. And so by the time you've got all your money deployed, your chances of success are a lot better. That's the way you should be doing it. Now, if you look at what has happened in a number of these companies, is what I call the fully funded folly, or what Vino would call that, is all the money goes in up front, And all these companies that fail in these early stages have actually consumed the same amount of money as a company that ultimately becomes successful. So in other words, the economics don't work. I think Solyndra, which all of you will be very aware of, is an example of that. I mean, $1 billion went into that company. They put $500 million in the company before the product was working, and then another $500 million in the company to then find out that actually the product that they were producing, which they could produce at that point, was not competitive in the marketplace. Now, I don't think anyone was, and I don't hold it against them, that they didn't foresee that the Chinese panels were going to be so much cheaper that they were not going to be competitive. What I do hold against them is that they spent $1 billion to get to that point. I think they should be able to go to the point with a lot less money than they did. So that's the way you deal with that. And yes, venture takes forever. Actually, all venture takes forever. It takes, if you look at all the companies in the US that have been successful in this market, it's 6.5 years for trade sales, it's 9 years even for IPOs, and that includes all the good ones. So it is an industry that takes forever, but of course, when they work, I think we're seeing the Facebook IPO hopefully soon, and I mean, that's a huge thing. So it works really well then. So then to quickly talk about how do we then do it, and you know how, which may also relevant for you guys, like how can you attract our money, or why would we invest in your company, not in someone else? So first, what kind of companies do we pick? So we look for companies that have a disruptive change in a big market. We look for companies that have top entrepreneurial management talent, customer-centric thinking, and have a real competitive advantage. And I'll use 4 examples of actually portfolio companies from our portfolio, because those I know best, to illustrate these 4 points. So we all know that in the cleantech side, we are in major big markets, and these markets are growing rapidly. If you take an example of that, first, why would you want to be in a big market like that? It is going to take money to go there, so you want to make sure that when you have deployed 50 million or 100 million in a company, you're in a market that's big enough that you can create a really big exit out of that. Secondly, if you are in a big market and you can actually afford to make a couple of mistakes. So if you, in the end of the day, spend 50 million to get there, and you make a couple of mistakes, you spend 60 or 70 million in there, if it becomes a 3 billion exit, it's okay. If you're looking at selling a company for 60 million, whether you then spend 20 or 30 million makes a big difference. So that's why you want to be in a very big market. As an example, Glow is a Swedish company that we invested in. They're in LEDs. They grow nanowire LEDs, which give yet another 30–35% energy efficiency and better color. So it's a $12 billion market today. It's growing at 35% compounded growth rate. And that's actually not yet taken into account the lighting. The lighting industry is actually only a very small part of LED, as you probably know. I mean, most of the LEDs, 85% of the LEDs is actually displays, cell phones, TVs, all of that kind of stuff. So with Glow, we raised 60 million. That will get us, that 60 million will get us to the point, and that's we're actually weeks away from that, where Solyndra used 500 million to get to. At that point, we'll raise another 50 million, so that's going to happen, probably in Q3 of this year, and take the company out to volume production. And there's a big market to grab, which is why we can spend so much money to do that. Enexis, microinverter company we have, is a good example for top entrepreneurial and management talent. I mean, if you want to create these big companies, you can't do that unless you have the best people to do it with. So you always need to think through your company. What are the people that I need to go into my next phase? And we always think about that as well. You need to be willing to actually, maybe even give up your own position in the company to bring people in, do something else in your company where you are best at. And Enexis is a good example of that. It's a company where we, in May 2009, so 3 years ago, we invested in 6 PhDs in a laboratory in Cambridge with what they thought was a prototype. I would say it was more a proof of concept. We, over the past 3 years, we've built, so the founders are all 6 still there today. We've built a complete management team in that company. We brought in 2 guys from Intel, Mike Pfister, which was actually, this is going to be taped, right? So I should be careful what I say here. But he was probably the number 2 and number 3 at Intel. Didn't become the new CEO. Went and ran Cadence for a while. Was involved in 2 startups. Was on the board of our company. Stepped in as a CEO. A VP operations, which did 2 startup companies, which scaled from nothing to 200 million, one 300 million, the other one, and actually both were sold to Cisco. So he said, he made me promise, don't sell the company to Cisco. I don't want to work for Cisco a third time again. And we brought people from the industry in, from the solar industry in Europe and in North America. So we really built a top-notch management team, no money saved, to get the very best people to do that. And the result, there's 2 microinverter companies that have significant traction in the market. One is Enphase, a US company. They have just started their roadshow for their IPO, and the other one is Nexus, a European US company now, which we've invested in. And then customer-centric thinking. In the end of the day, you need to think, what does your customer want? I mean, you want to solve a real customer problem, something that keeps your customer awake at night. You want to make sure that you come to that problem with a solution, not just a technology and trusting other people to develop a solution. And of course, we always like to see some evidence of that. Enocean is a company that many of you will know. It's been around forever, I think. It's forever and a day, I would say. We've invested in the company in 2002. They basically make wireless, batteryless sensor networks. I mean, the simple example is a light switch, where if you want to refurbish a building and you want to put a light switch in different places, you don't need to do the wiring. So you want to go and put wireless wireless light switches in there. That's in a way a pretty easy solution. The problem, of course, is, especially in commercial buildings, when you have batteries in there, you've got a guy running around the building every day to change out the batteries, so you don't want to go there. And that's why Enocean came with the product that they came with. So the result, they're the leader in that market. And of course now with the whole, and I think you mentioned it before, with the whole smart home, the smart grid coming up, they're perfectly positioned to play a major role in that development. And the last thing, I think we need a batteryless pointer clicker as well, by the way, but okay, is sustainable competitive advantage. On the internet side, that can be first mover advantage and be quick, create a network effect. I think in the kind of cleantech companies, very often we're talking about IP. Heliotech, which is one of our Dresden-based companies, organic photovoltaics, is a good example of that. We invested in the company 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago. They have an organic photovoltaic technology which is different from anyone else. All the other guys have problems with lifetime and with efficiency. Heliotech has 30 years lifetime proven today, and I think 10%, Thibault, is the right number, right? Today, proven efficiency, and the theoretical efficiency is actually going up to 20% for what they do. So 17 patents granted there, 20 applications. I would say it is more than unlikely that someone else is going to do the same thing with an IP position and the amount of research that's been going in there. So these are the things that we look for in these kind of companies. And then, of course, the question is, how do we then help making these companies successful? So there's actually no magic wand. I use a very simple framework myself. I monitor 4 things in a company, and this is in order of priority. So the first and most important point is, at any given point in time, and I said it before, making sure we have the best possible team to develop this company. And so in many ways, I always say I'm just a better paid headhunter. I make sure that whenever we have a company and I think, okay, now this is the next step in the phase, I'm the guy that will say to the CEO, listen, I mean, should we not be looking for that person? Should we not be looking for someone with that skill set, and try to drive the team? I have 2 offices, one in London and one in Munich. On the wall opposite of my office, there's a plaque. And on that plaque, it says, very much in the spirit of the first Clinton campaign, it says, it's the people, stupid. It's the most important thing in a startup company. Get the right people, always. The second thing is, have the right clock frequency. If you try to beat the big guys with big budgets, which have a place in the market already, it is very, very difficult to do that if you're going to actually operate at the same clock frequency as these big companies are operating. So you need to have an environment where people are acting in days, not acting in weeks, where people are responding to emails in real time, where you can wake up every single person of the company at 2 o'clock at night and he will be right there, he'll get you what you need. That's the environment that you want to have in a company if it's going to be successful. You need to make sure that you have a long-term strategy for the company. Long-term in the eyes of a venture capitalist obviously is 3 to 4 years. And you need to somehow be able to translate that long-term strategy into what are we going to do actually the first 1 or 2 quarters. So it's a little bit of a bridge between what a futurist was saying earlier. you know, we're going to go from shortism and we're going to go to more long-termism. I think actually you need to do both. You need to have the long-term view, and you need to decide for yourself, if I want to get that long-term strategy to work, what are my short-term goals that I need to achieve? Because you cannot manage an organization and people simply by only long-term goals, because you give too many reasons for people to say, it's going to be okay in 3 to 4 years. And the last thing in a startup company is have a bang for the buck culture. In a big corporate, you can say, I have a good idea. I need $1 million for that. In a startup company, that's not the way it works. You know exactly how many millions you have. If you want to use $1 million for a specific project, well, you better find a place where you can cut that $1 million out where you think it's going to be less well spent. So that's the way we try to help these companies to make it successful. And then to the last point, we of course then try to sell these companies and try to make money. Now I'll bore you with a couple of statistics first. And if you look at the incorporations of all the companies that were ever sold for more or taken public for more than $100 million, it's a pretty steady line. So, and obviously it's steadying down because many of the companies after 2000 have just simply not been exited, right? These are realized exits. So it would almost suggest that when you start your company, it doesn't matter. Every year there's good companies started. Now, if you look at, I need an ocean contact in here, but okay. The exits of these companies are a lot less steady. There's actually a pretty erratic, so there's a number of companies in every year when they have been exited. Now, if you think about this, it's actually pretty obvious why this is the case. If you overlay NASDAQ on that, I mean, you know, when do you exit companies? Well, when the markets are good for it, right? And when people tell you that if we don't have good public markets to take our companies public, we will go and we'll sell these companies in trade sales. Frankly, I think that's all bullshit, because the trade buyer that's going to pay the premium for your company, he's actually going to be quoted on NASDAQ. And yeah, sure, if he buys the company for 40 million or 50 million, it doesn't really matter. He kind of like sweep it under the carpet. However, if he's going to buy a company for 300, 400, 500 million, he better have a story to explain to the stock markets. If the stock markets are not ready for growth stories, you cannot exit your companies. So the most important thing for selling the companies is actually the stock market environment, whether we like it or whether we don't like it. So to end on a positive slide on that, it's starting to happen again. I think the stock markets are there, and we've seen a number of companies, not just on the internet. These are companies in the cleantech sector that have gone out, that have been going public, and there's a big pipeline of companies that have filed their S1 and F1 for going out in the next 6 to 9 months. So I think we're looking actually at a very good environment going forward. That was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bart. We have time for 1 or 2 questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Here's a question in the front. Please wait for the microphone.
Thanks. My name is Mr. Schwalbe. Just a short question. How attractive is still the photovoltaics business for your company? I mean the traditional one, not the organic PV, the traditional one.
Yeah, excellent question. So many people would say that photovoltaic PV is dead. Again, I think it's just such a stupid thing to say. I mean, Germany has 50% of the installed base of photovoltaic in the world. I don't think we have the sunniest country in the world. I've been living here for 12 years now, and the electricity produced in Germany by solar is around 2%, right? Roughly 2 and a bit, 2.5. 3 already. Okay, so 3%. In your chart, which you had up there, I think it assumes that in the future there'll be about 15 to 20% of the energy. 20% will be produced. So in the one country where half of the world installed base is, we have about 1/10 of the potential installed. So if you extrapolate that just in Germany, we'll have 10 times more. Now we extrapolate that across the world, so I think we've only just started. The second point that I'll make is that I think there's been a lot of focus, and it's a function maybe of, to talk with the futurist again, of capitalism on big projects where people could make a big buck on the back of feed-in tariffs. In the end of the day, if you go to residential, which is where I think that the bigger market is, in residential, or the bigger market opportunity is, there we're talking about grid parity. If you put a big plant out in the field in Lower Saxony, I mean, you have to compete with a windmill, you have to compete with a coal-fired power plant because you feed into the grid. You have all the costs of distributing the electricity just like everyone else has. If you put it on, I have it on my roof, I mean, I actually can compare that cost of my solar power with the cost that I pay for it myself, which is 20 cents, not 4 or 5 cents. And if I don't use it because I'm on holiday, well, guess what? Maybe my neighbor or the guy two doors down in the street is going to use it. So maybe I will have to pay a little charge for the low voltage part of the grid, which actually is, in the overall grid cost, the low voltage part is peanuts. It's very small. So I think photovoltaics it's a typical, I'd have to do it like this, Gardner hype cycle, right? So we've been there. That was when Q-Cells, REC, SolarWorld all went out. We're right, hopefully here. And I think it is a great market. We are investing in the space, not just in organics.
All right.
Just
make it short.
We can grab a coffee.
Okay, afterwards. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a coffee break discussion. One more question, and then we have the final speaker before the coffee break.
Ben Lynch, Cleantech Capital Advisors. I think we're going to have corporate venture capitalists present at another point during this conference, but for companies who might be considering the relative merits of going down the corporate venture capitalist route versus financial venture capitalist route, so to speak, what are the sort of criteria that you would refer to, and when do you think it might make more sense for that company to deal with guys like Wellington versus go to a Siemens or an Alstom or somebody like that?
So I think it's a rather theoretical question. I think today, as a startup, I would say get all the money you can get. It's very hard to get money for a startup. You can get it from a VC, get it from a VC, you can get it from a corporate, get it from a corporate. The one thing I would say, I have never sold, and I've been in this business for 14 years, and I think that Wellington also never has sold a company to a corporate investor that was in the company already. As I like to say always, when you've seen how people make the sausage, you're less likely to want to buy it in the end. So if you think that you're going to sell your company to Siemens, you may not want to take them as the core. That's the only thing I would say. Apart from that, just take the money from whoever's going to give it to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Bart.